both philanthropy and politics have this idea of saying, let's solve a problem we can actually solve. And norms seems like a problem we cannot solve, right? It just seems and I think there's a lot of bankers and engineers in governments and administration, and they're always looking for knobs, and they don't seem to find the knobs that can actually give them control on norms, right? It sort of seems like the case, but beginning of the podcast, Erin, you gave this example of how we've seen norms change. In some sense, we've seen norms on how kids do, what social behavior is acceptable, what kind of jokes can be cracked today or what cannot.
Yeah.
We've changed. Humor has been redefined in our own times in terms of what is there. But in the world of gender, and you've both looked at this now for a few decades, have you seen changes in the way gender norms actually play out? And do you have a sense of what is causing that change in some form?
I don't know whether you've heard of Mandesi Mahila Bank. It's a fantastic, women's bank in India. So when I think in 1997, when Chetna, who's an Ashoka fellow, and that's how I knew her, went to the RBI saying that we want to set up a women's cooperative bank in Satara. They said, very good, and she was in talks when they found out that the 100% of the women were illiterate. They couldn't sign their names. They said, how can we do deals with some people who can't even sign their names? So they said, okay, we'll go back to the drawing board. They went back to the drawing board, and for 6 months, they had adult literacy classes, and they just practiced signing. They practiced signing their names, writing their names on paper. And somehow, 6 months later, they got into a room with some RBI officials, and they said, okay, give us any number and ask us to count interest on them. If we fail, don't give us the bank. But if we don't fail, give us the bank. So they knew that inherently they're good at maths. And they had now the confidence that they can sign their names. Coupled with that, they got the bank. And not only the bank, now they have, management programs for the women. They have so many others, NBFCs. Mandesi has an NBFC. So, it just went from one thing to the other based on that simple fact that women needed to believe in themselves and need to have that one skill that was very essential in getting them the bank.
Right.
So it is possible to change those norms. And the reason why they wanted those loans in the first place was that banks were giving loan to their husbands who would then squander it away by drinking, and it would not come back to their home. So they decided that those banks are not, we'll have our own bank and we will change the norms in society. And one of the rules that they had was that no man can be given a loan alone. It has to be a joint loan. So, change these simple norms. These are simple norms to push back against. But if you keep on doing that for 10 years, look at where Mandesi has gone from that 1997 to now. Yeah. If I take an example very close to my work, which was with Breakthrough, and we've seen after doing, a gender equity curriculum with adolescents for 5 to 7 years, being consistently, working with the community in sending these messages, working with adolescents on a gender equity curriculum that tells them that you are equal and you can do anything, we saw an uptake of non-traditional work. So women started working as plumbers, as welders, fighting ward council elections. Those are not, 10 years ago, if you told a UP village that your daughter is going to become a plumber, they'll be like, this is unthinkable. So norms change, they can change. It needs a very careful handling. It needs time, but they do change.
I think we're both the most familiar and often in our education system, which we have done a lot of work in. If you look within education, often it's one of the examples that you can see. There's been lots of research done on conditional cash transfers to have more girls in school in many different regions. What you see is that not only increases the participation of girls in school, but actually changes parental attitudes and beliefs over time. And then you can phase out the actual cash transfer, but girls remain going to school in higher numbers because it's a mindset change that is sustainable. Right. So I think those are kind of system level changes that you see. I think what's interesting, though, is a lot of what we're talking about in these stories are our own, are really individuals that are sort of changing. We have to change our own attitudes and beliefs and behaviors. And then that kind of starts to reshape a group, whether that might be an office setting or a family or a community or a school. Some of the stories I love the most are, we were actually the other day and last week at a conference talking about this with many of our partners from around the world. And we had youth that had come in from different parts of India that had gone through programs, in their teen years, and they were now in their early 20s, and so kind of reflecting back on what worked. And what they were talking about was often, they were exposed to some sort of program that challenged them to take on different care responsibilities and, of younger siblings, or to take on household chores at home, or to take on chores within the school environment. And I think two things that really stood out for me is, one, often it's the boys that get to make those choices to change something that is easier than for a girl, right? I mean, it's easier for a boy to go home and say, I want to help with household chores, than it is for a girl to go home and say, I'm going to stop doing all the household chores. Somebody needs to help me, right? It takes both boys and girls and all binaries to really think about how we treat each other and how we all show up, and what is the alternative kind of, view of these things that we want to create that is more equitable for everybody. So I think we have a lot more influence in peer groups that we have to think about. That is something to think, more deeply, is how to, and that, now happens when we can, touch on technology. This is often happening online as much as it is happening, in person, right? You're seeing things on YouTube or Instagram, and that's where a lot of youth are getting their, sort of gender norms and social norms, are where they're being influenced.